everyone, Carol from Segovia Quilts here. Today in the quilting studio, we're going to be putting together a super cute quilt top using a brand new pattern that we are now offering in our shop. So the pattern that we're going to be using today is called Tailfeather, and this is it. This is by Wren Collective. We've done one of her patterns before. We did the Aftershock quilt top, and today we're going to be doing the Tailfeather pattern. So now this pattern is available in several different sizes, and that is baby, throw, twin, and queen size. So this is a super cute pattern. Hopefully you can see it there, the glare isn't too crazy. So now in the pattern, the picture on it, they are using solid colors. But I wanted to mix it up a bit, and we're going to be using some prints today. The fabric collection we're going to be using for this pattern is called American Beauty. The designer is Dani Mogstad, and it's for Riley Blake Designs. So let's go ahead and check out the fabric that we're going to be using for this pattern today. Alright, so here are the fabrics we're going to be using for our pattern today. So now I selected several from the collection. I tried to keep about the same amount of colors as far as I got 3 navies, 3 storms, 3 reds, and I did end up getting 4 whites, but for the most part I kept the same number of colors from each color area, if you will. So now for our pattern, I will be using white as my background, and I'm also going to be using white for my backing fabric as well. So I do have a large amount of the Riley white here, and I did end up adding in 2 additional colors outside of the collection. These are just coordinating basics from more of the Riley Blake collections. This is the Confetti Cottons Oxford Blue. This is a B Ginghams. This is the Carolyn Denim. And of these 2 that are outside of the collection, I'm going with the navy one to do our binding. So let me go ahead and show you the fabric requirements for our pattern today. So again, we are making the Tailfeather pattern. This is by Wren Collective. It is listed as a beginner level pattern. It does offer the different sizes here, so if you wanted to do a small baby size you can, all the way up to a queen size, and I have actually seen a couple of pictures on Instagram where people did a table runner, so that's not listed on here, but you can totally do something even smaller like a table runner or even a nice wall hanging. Okay, so for our quilt I will be making the throw size. So you see the throw size is listed as 63 by 63. I am using yardage for our pattern today, but you can use fat quarters as it is fat quarter friendly. So you can see you will need 14 fat quarters or 1/4 yard cut. So I have that here. For the background fabric, you will need 3 yards. The backing fabric, you need 4 yards. And then for the binding, you will need a 1/2 yard. So for the tutorial, I will not be providing the measurements for all of the pieces that we're going to be cutting. To get the exact measurements, you will need to go and order the pattern. Again, it is available on our website. You can go ahead and get that today. But I will be showing you how to piece everything together once you have everything cut out. So let me start off by opening up all of these beautiful fabrics and showing you each one of the fabrics. Again, this is the American Beauty collection. It is designed by Dani Mogstad, and it is for Riley Blake Designs. So I did get an additional fabric to add to our pattern today. I didn't set it out in the beginning, but I remembered when I saw this. So this is the Painter's Watercolor Swirl. This is bleached denim. Again, this is outside of the American Beauty collection, but as far as the color value goes, it does go with the collection. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew this is outside of the American Beauty collection, but it does match. before we start cutting out any of our pieces for our pattern, you want to go ahead and hit them with an iron, make sure everything is nice and smooth. This way you have nice, precise cuts. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I have finished cutting out my pieces for the actual feathers. And the feathers are all of these pretty blocks here on the pattern. So I've cut out all of my colored pieces, and I am using yardage. So I got 1/4 yard of 14 different prints, and this is what I have left over. So there's a couple of inches here by the selvage, and then this is also what I have left over. I have some of these and these from all of the fabrics, and then these edges here, I only had a couple of these from I think 3 of the different fabrics, and I only kept pieces that were 1 inch or wider. I can use these for a string quilt or something like that. So this is what I have left over. If you are not a super confident cutter, I definitely recommend getting a little bit more than 1/4 yard, especially I did have, I think, one of the prints that the cut was kind of pretty wonky, and one of my pieces was about 1/8 of an inch short on one edge of the block. So like if this is the block, this is the straight edge, it bumped in about 1/8 of an inch on one of them, and I didn't have enough fabric to try and cut another piece. So definitely keep that in mind if you're not super confident, or if you just want to have a little extra. Consider getting, instead of 1/4 of a yard, if you're not using fat quarters, only if you're using yardage, instead of getting 1/4 of a yard, see if you can get maybe 3/8 of a yard, or if you need to bump it up to 1/2 of a yard. All right, so I have finished cutting out all of my background pieces, and I just finished cutting my binding. So now that all of our pieces are cut out for our quilt top and our binding, we can go ahead and move on to the next step. All right, so once you have all of your background pieces and all of your printed fabric pieces cut out, so next you need to start drawing some lines. So what you want to do is you want to get your background pieces and pair them together. So they need to be the same prints or the same solid colors on both sides. So we have that, we have our background pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to be putting one background piece over top of one of our printed fabrics. So now, once you have them on top of each other, so now we're going to draw a line from this corner to this corner, and then from this corner to this corner. So what we're doing is we're essentially doing half square triangles. So we'll draw a line. I'm just using a pencil. You're not going to see this through the front side. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to essentially be doing half square triangles. So we're going to be sewing along this line right here, along these 2 lines that we just drew, and then we're going to be cutting off the excess. So when you're doing this, you need to make sure the orientation is right. And the good thing about this particular fabric line, the American Beauty fabric line, is none of the prints are directional, so we don't have to worry about making sure they're going to be oriented in the right direction. So now, to make things easier, if you want, you can go ahead and take all of your background pieces and draw your diagonal line on them beforehand, so it's one less step to do when you get to this part. So now that we have our diagonal lines drawn, we're going to go ahead and sew on these diagonal lines. And what I'm going to do is, instead of wasting the piece that we're going to be cutting off, I'm going to go ahead and do a second diagonal line 1/2 inch away from this one, and then I'll be able to save that half square triangle, which is going to be my printed fabric along with my background fabric. So I'm going to sew down both of these lines and then do a second sewn line. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I sewed both of my drawn lines. I went ahead and separated the 2 pieces. So now we are left with this on this side and this on this side. So this is what yours should look like. And then these are the extra half square triangles that we got by sewing that second additional seam line. So you can hang on to these and make, you know, maybe like a pillow or something to go along with our quilt top when you're done. So I'm definitely going to be saving these for later. So now you want to do the exact same thing to the remainder of your printed fabric. Again, being mindful of the direction and the placement of your pieces of fabric and the direction you are sewing your lines. All right, so I have all of my pieces sewn, cut, and pressed. So now the pattern does say for these sections over here to press the seams to the darker fabric. Because I am using white as my background, all of my seams are going this way instead of towards the white. I did go ahead and also press all of my bonus half square triangles. That's not called for in the pattern, but I figured if I'm pressing, might as well go ahead and hit these. So this step is done, so now we can move on to the next step. All right, so the next step is going to be using the remaining pieces of our printed fabric and then still also using the squares of our background fabric. So the pattern says to take 2 pieces of 2 different fabrics. So because I want to make sure I don't end up with any of my lighter fabrics together, I'm going to start with those. So I'm going to take 2 of these prints here. And it does need to be the same, so you wouldn't want to do like one of these and one of these. I mean, you could if you're doing a scrappy version of this, but we're not. So I'm going to get the same fabric, so I have those 2. And then I'm just going to take one of these fabrics here and get 2 pieces. So we'll go ahead and start with this red one here, and we're going to lay these here on the outside. So now what you're going to do is you're going to sew these right sides together. So you will sew down this side here, and then you will sew down this side here. So you're going to want to do that with all the rest of your printed fabrics. So I'm going to go ahead and pair everybody up and sew down all of these sides. All right, so I have all of my pairs sewn together and I have pressed the seams already. The pattern does state to press the seams towards the darker fabric. So for these pairs here, I have pressed my seams towards the red. So the next step is you want to go ahead and get your pairs, and now we're going to get our blocks of our background fabric, and we're going to do the same like we did with the larger blocks previously. So you want to lay your background fabric square right up here on the top, and now we're going to be drawing our lines again. So our line is going to go from this corner down in and this corner down in. Again, like I did with my last blocks, I am going to do a second seam because we are going to be sewing on this line here, and then we are going to be cutting off the excess over here. So I've drawn my first line here, and let me darken up this top part. And now I'm going to do another line a 1/2 inch over. And when I sew my seam, I'm going to sew on both of these lines, and then I'm going to end up being able to get a bonus half square triangle when I cut off the excess of these blocks. So I'm going to draw this line here and go in a 1/2 inch and draw another line. There we go. So I've got my 2 lines drawn. So now I'm just going to get my pins here, and I'm going to pin my blocks just so that my background fabric here doesn't shift around on me while I'm sewing everything together. There we go. All right, so now we're going to go and sew down both of our lines. All right, so I've sewn down both of our lines on both sets of blocks. I have already cut this one apart, so let's go ahead and cut this one apart now. So I did find when I was doing this with our other blocks, I would stack 2 of these up on top of each other, lining up this center line here, lining up the bottom one and the top one, and then I would cut 2 at a time. Just with the number of blocks that we're going to be using for this particular pattern, I did find it a little bit time saving to do 2 at a time. So you can just use that as a little helpful tip if you're comfortable cutting 2 at a time. I highly recommend it. All right, so these are cut. So now this is what our block is going to look like. Look at how cute that is. Well, actually, it'll be the other way around. But the fabrics make it so stinking cute. So this is what some of our blocks will look like, and the other blocks will be just opposite. So depending on the layout, it'll either be having the point come in like this, or they will be opposite, and then your background fabric will be the point going down. So this is what you should have. And then these are the bonus half square triangles that we're going to be getting from these particular blocks. So you've got a large section of this print and then a little section of this print here, but they look super stinking cute. So I am going to go ahead and sew the rest of these blocks, doing the same thing, putting my background fabric square, drawing my 2 lines, and then we're gonna sew, and then I'm gonna go ahead and press all of my seams for these blocks, and I'm gonna go ahead and press my bonus half square triangles. Just because I'm already pressing, why not just knock them both out at the same time? So let's go ahead and get to sewing. So this is what we have now, and then this stack here are all of the bonus blocks that we got after cutting off the extra block that we sewed our seam for. So this is what we have. So this stack here will go with my other pile of bonus blocks to do another project with afterwards. So the next step now is to actually start laying out our rows. This is where the size that you are making comes into play. So let me show you the pattern here. So we are making the throw size version of this quilt. So these are the rows that we're going to go ahead and start laying out. So I'm just going to start with the very first row here, and we will move our blocks here out of the way, and then we'll go ahead and get them laid out. So now these strips here were part of the background fabric that we cut previously. These strips are the same length as all of our blocks here. So now this is going to be essentially the sashing that's going to go between all of our blocks. For the first row, we're going to need 3 sets of our 2-tone blocks. So I'm just going to pull out the first 3 that are up here on my stack. And I'm just going to make sure that they're not too terribly the same. So I've got a red, my gingham. I've got 2 of my darks. Let me try and grab a white instead. So let's see, that's right, and white and dark. How about this one? This one looks good. All right, so we will switch that out. All right, so these are the 3 sets of 2-tone that we need. And now we need 2 sets of our solid blocks, and that is this right here. So I'm just going to look for 2 sets that don't have the same print as any of these. So this print is different from the white, so we'll use this one, and I think this one's good. This is different from the red print that we have there. So we'll go ahead and use these 2 sets here. All right, so now we're going to start, I think I'll just start with this red and gingham one here. So we're going to lay it out according to the pattern. So for the first row, you want one of the white squares as your first block starting out. So we're going to put that, and then we'll do a sashing strip, and then we're going to do the next block here. I'm going to overlap them just so we can make sure that we can get all of them to fit here. So we do that one, and then I think I'll go with one of these white blocks. So now these next ones here, we're going to have it actually looking exactly like this. So we've got this one, our sashing, this one, we need another sashing. I'm going to put that right there. And then this one here, another sashing. So you're going to have a sashing strip between every single one of these blocks here. So we have that. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get all of mine to fit. So we'll just try and squeeze it in a little bit. All right, so there's that. And then let's see, I think for the next one, I think I'll go ahead and do this one here. So this one, we want kind of the arrow effect here. So you want to make sure that your two matching fabrics here are making a point here. So we'll put that there. We'll grab our next sashing strip. That'll go right there. And then that one right there. All right, so I'm just going to scooch these over so that we can get the other ones in here to fit. All right, so there's that. Grab another sashing strip. Okay, so the next one will be this red one here. Again, this is our solid color versus our two-tone color. Okay, so this one, we want the arrow, if you will, the arrow facing down. So this one will go there. Another sashing strip right there. And then there's this one. So that'll go there. Another sashing strip. And then this is our last set of two tones for the row. So for this one, we want it to make, we want it to make an arrow. So you want your arrow to go up. So we'll go ahead and put this one there, our sashing strip, and then our last piece. So this is the order, and I know it's difficult to see because they're overlapping, but this is the order that we want everything to be sewn in. So let's go ahead and sew this all together. All right, so here's our first row. So I went ahead and laid it out this way we can see all of it together. So you can see our two-tone block starts it off facing up, our solid color facing down, two-tone up, solid color facing down, and then the last two-tone is facing up. So now we can go ahead and start laying out our second row. So for the second row, you're going to be doing the same as far as two-tone will go right here, solid color right underneath it, two-tone, solid color, two-tone. I have the rest of our blocks here, so let's go ahead and we're just going to grab these first two on the top. So to complete the rest of this feather, you're going to take the two blocks here and face them like this. So now you will still have a sashing strip in the middle between these two, but let me show you from a distance. Actually, I guess I'll go ahead and spread it out, and we'll go ahead and put the sashing strip. So here's this. There we go. So from a distance now, so it looks like a feather. So this is what we're going to do for all of these. So let's go ahead and do the next one. So we'll just grab again the first two blocks here on the top, and we're going to face these down. And again, we're going to have sashing strips in between these two blocks here and in the middle, oops, of these two right here. There. So now you can see, so it forms the feather. This one is facing up, this one is facing down, and then we're going to do the same thing for the remaining three feathers. So here's the layout for my second row. This I think took me a little longer than I anticipated, just because I was really trying to make sure I didn't have any of the same print right next to each other. So I switched out a couple of these several times. So now I'm going to go ahead and lay out the rest of my rows so I can make sure I like the placement of all of my blocks before I sew the rest of them together. So again, it's laid out exactly the same as the first and second row. Well, really the only difference is, so on the first row, this is our two-toned block or feather right here. This is our solid, two-tone, solid, and two-tone. The second feathers, this is a solid, and then the second one is a two-tone, solid, two-tone, solid. So same direction, they are pointing in the same direction, but instead of being a two-tone, it switches to the solid. And then when we get down to our last row of feathers, which will be our fifth and sixth rows, then it'll switch back to two-tone, solid, two-tone, solid, two-tone. So let's go ahead and lay out that last row of feathers. Alright, so I have all of my rows laid out. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together, and then I'll add in my sashing strips in between them once these little individual units are sewn together. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I've sewn each of these little sections together. So each section is one part of the feather, the sashing, and then the other part of the feather. Now I can go ahead and add in the sashing pieces between each of these sections here. Alright, so I have finished pressing all of my seams, and as you can see, I did go ahead and press all of them in towards the sashing piece. I did it that way just because that's the direction the fabric really seemed to want to go. So instead of fighting it, I just went ahead and went along with it and pressed them all in. So now I went ahead and measured all of my rows, and they do come out to being 59.5 inches, which is what the pattern said they should be based on it being a throw size that I'm doing. So it's 59.5 inches, so I did go ahead and cut my middle sashing strips, the ones that are going to go between each row here. So we had cut all of our strips from the width of fabric, and the pattern instructs you to sew all of them together and then measure out what you need. So now I've got all of those sashing strips ready to go, and the pattern also says to have a stronger bond to do a mitered join on the seam. So I did go ahead and do a miter join on the seam. Hopefully you can see that there. You don't have to do a miter join. You can do a straight seam if you want. I mitered it. So now we're going to go ahead and lay them in between each of our rows here. So now that I have those laid out, I can go ahead and sew them onto each of the rows, and then we can go ahead and sew all of the rows together. Alright, so I have all of my row sashing strips sewn into place. I have pressed all of my seams, so I did go ahead and press my seams into the sashing strips in the middle, so you can see all of my seams are facing into each of the different sashing strips. So this is looking so stinking cute so far. I love the fabric collection that I chose for this particular quilt. So we are almost done with the top. So now what we need to do still is we need to add the border pieces to the entire outside of the quilt. For that, we're going to get the strips that we cut earlier. These are thicker than the sashing strips, so we're going to start with our two left and right sashing pieces first, or border pieces first. Alright, so here is our completed quilt top. So I have all of my borders sewn onto it, and I love how this came out. This particular fabric collection with this particular pattern, to me, I feel like screams picnic blanket. I can totally see myself at a park with this quilt laying out on the grass under a tree in the shade, and just having a nice relaxing day at the park. So overall, this is a very easy pattern. It is listed as a beginner pattern. So again, the pattern is called Tailfeather and it is by Wren Collective and it is available for purchase in our shop. The pattern is also fat quarter friendly, so if you have a fat quarter bundle that you've been itching to use, I highly recommend trying it out with this particular pattern. The fabric collection that I used for this quilt top is called American Beauty. It is by Dani Mogstad and it's for Riley Blake Designs. If you're interested in getting this beautiful fabric collection, I do have a link for it in the description down below. So again, this quilt top is done, so the next steps will be actually quilting it. And while I've not picked a quilting pattern for it just yet, I will be doing a video of the quilting process and then showing the completed quilt. So I did do the throw size version of this pattern. Based on the cutting instructions for the throw size for this pattern, I did end up having 10 of these 2-block units left over. So I can easily turn these into a wall hanging or a table runner or a couple of pillows to go with the matching quilt. And this pattern also comes with bonus blocks, or I like to call them bonus blocks. So when we cut off the extra fabric from sewing on our background fabric here, we are left with a stack, a good stack, of all of these half square triangles. So I've not counted them yet, but there's more than enough where you can easily knock out a good size secondary quilt just from your bonus blocks from these areas right here. I will be doing another project with all of these bonus blocks in the future, so make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss that video. Make sure you pick up your copy of the Tailfeather pattern. Again, it is available for purchase in my online shop, and I have the link for it in the description down below, so make sure to check that out. If you have any questions about today's tutorial, go ahead and leave them in the comments section down below. If you liked today's video, please make sure to hit it with a big thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber to my YouTube channel yet, please make sure you do so by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.